everyone, Miss Adriana here again with another Teen Crafternoon. Today we are going to do watercolor flowers, so we're going to show you some techniques on how to create these great flowers. We're going to do some peonies, we'll work on some lavender, and then we'll top it off with a little bit of tulips. So stay tuned, we'll go through the list of things that you need, so supplies, and then we'll go through some techniques on how to create these great springtime flowers. See you soon. Hey guys, so the first flower that we're going to work on is called a peony, and the supplies that I've got, again, I've got a nice watercolor brush here. I do have another one with me, a slightly bigger one, but I tend to use this one especially because of the size paper. I do have some water that is very colored right now. It's very pink because of the fact that I've done some practice pages before we started. I am going to be using my favorite watercolor palette, which is the Paul Rubens, and we're gonna probably be using a lot of, pinks and maybe a little bit of yellow. Definitely gonna do one of the lavender ones. We'll use the purple, so I do want to do a lavender stalk. But we're gonna get started with a peony, and peonies are they look like a little cabbage. They've got a lot of petals. They come in a wide variety of colors, and a lot of different styles of them. So they can have some very beautiful soft petals, and then they can have some really crazy leafy petals. So there's quite a few varieties of peony. Today I'm working on dry, so I'm actually not going to be wetting my paper, and the reason for that is that we are going to be layering a lot of color, and if I wet my paper, I'm going to be sitting here forever. So we're actually not going to wet the paper first. So the first thing I want to do is essentially create the bottom layer of petals and just build the shape. And I'm going to start with a very, very, very light color. And I do want my brush to be nice and moist, but not super saturated. It shouldn't be dripping water. So I do have a paper towel. As you can see, I've been just dabbing the brush across it just to get some of the water off. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the side of the brush, and I'm just gonna start laying some petals here. I'm being very loose because we're going to layer these up. And then we do wanna give the impression of the back of the flower. So we're gonna do something like that. And like I said, it's like a little bit of a cabbage, and we can do you can be very loose. So I've put down the shape, and what I want to do is let it dry just a tiny bit, and then what we're going to do is go in with darker color and lay out a little bit of more petals, and then we're going to edge them a little bit just to give detail to where the petals actually lie. And as you can see, I do have white in between my petals, and that's just because if I covered this all in color, I would have to do each individual single petal, let it dry before I start a new one. Otherwise, we'll be here till dawn. But you can leave space in between, and that will still give the impression of the petals having their own space. So what I'm gonna do is now I'm going in with a little bit darker color. I'm actually going to bring in a tiny bit more, add a little more water. And then I'm gonna, again, here, see that is super saturated. So I'm really trying to just load up the tip of the brush, and then I'm getting rid of some of the excess. And for this, I am going to be using the very tip of the brush, and this is just because I want to really detail where these petals are and give them some definition. So I'm going to start giving some definition here to the petals. You don't have to define every single one of them, but you do want to give some definition so that we can see the flower. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wet my brush And then I'm going to kind of bring that color in towards the center of some of these petals so that not all the petals are the same color. And this will give you a little bit more variation. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to start like picking up some of this color. So what I'm doing is I'm picking up the color, the excess color with my brush, and then I'm actually leaving it on the paper towel. And if your brush starts to get kind of limpy, you can just always do this. My brush was doing the limpy. And again, we've picked up a lot of that color, leaving behind some of those edges. So I'm gonna get a little bit more water here just to, and then we can go in again. And I'm getting that tip nice and pointy again, and I'm going to grab just a little more color and maybe do a little bit of detailing. And this is like almost really dry watercolor, and I'm using just the tip of the brush to give those petals just a little bit of like detail and texture. And there you have this like nice beautiful little cabbage shape, but it does need somewhere to rest on, so we do need to have a base for our flowers. So I've got some green here, and we're going to use this green, but peonies tend to have a very dark, sometimes they have a very dark stalk, so we're going to go with a darker color just to give this more emphasis. And so I'm going to take the tip of my brush and then kind of really force it in there just to create some leaves. And then we're gonna do here. And there we have a peony resting comfortably on its stalk. So there you have a peony. It's a fun little flower to make. As I said, we're gonna do fun little flowers, and these are just kind of impressions of the flowers. We're not gonna get super detailed because, you know, it's just fun springtime. So we'll move on to the next flower. I'm gonna go ahead and switch my paper out, and then I'll show you the next flower. All right, the next flower we're gonna do is one of my favorites, and you see it a lot here in Illinois, especially during springtime, which is the tulip. So we're gonna do some nice little loose tulips, and I decided to go with kind of a peachy color, so I've been mixing a little bit of orange and yellow and even a tiny bit of brown, a very light tan brown, to get a sort of orangey peachy color. And again, we're gonna start off very light, and then we're going to build up that color. So again, my brush is loaded, but it is not so superly saturated that it is dripping. That's not what you want, and we are working again on dry. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of do these sort of little two petal almost tulips, because tulips are very loose, and they're very beautiful, and they're just kind of a few little petals. They're such a gorgeous little flower, and we're getting kind of just almost like a U shape. And we're gonna go in again, and this one I'm gonna add a little bit more red to. And then we'll build another one here. And your petals don't have to completely connect, and they don't have to be completely symmetrical, so have fun with it. And then we're gonna do another one. And I'm kind of just continuing to mix red into this just to give variation. And again, I'm kind of wetting my brush and then getting some of that color off. And we'll do another one here. And I'm using mainly the side of my brush. And this one can have 3 little buds, little petals. And if we have too much, you can go back in with your brush and then take that excess off. And while that dries, so we've got 3 sort of little tulips grouped there together. While that dries, we're going to go ahead and build the stalks, and then we'll come back in and give it a little bit of definition to all of these beautiful flowers. So we're gonna go in with a much brighter green this time, almost like a pea green. So I'm gonna add a lot of this very bright green, and you can see here I've got this very dark green, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab some of this really bright green and just use it up here so we get like a little bit of a pea green, and that way if I need to darken it up, I already have a dark green there. So for this one, again, very loaded up brush, but it is not super saturated. It's very dry, and I just kind of want to get a little bit of a V shape here at the bottom of the tulip, and then I'm going to take the tip of my brush and just bring it down. And these can be very irregular, they don't have to be like a perfectly straight line. And again, we're gonna even cross the stalks there, and we're gonna get a little bit of that V shape there. And then we're gonna, very thick one there. And then we can kind of go from the bottom towards the top to create the leaves. So I'm gonna take my tip and then I'm gonna really press in and then really lightly go out. And then again here. And then here. And then maybe one here. And there we have all these little crossing stalks and leaves that give the tulips a base to live on. So we're gonna go back in with some color just to give these flowers a little more detail. I think I need to freshen up my water for the next set of flowers because this is getting very, very, very colorful. As you can see, I'm leaving a lot of color here on the paper towel. So once you start seeing this happen where you dip into your water and you go to a paper towel and you're leaving behind a ton of color, that means it's time to freshen up your water. But we'll do that when we change to the next flower. So again, I'm gonna load up. And I'm going to try to load mostly the tip of my brush. So I'm just basically loading up the tip of my brush. And then I'm going to go in here and kind of define some of these petals a little bit. And then I can go in with some water and just kind of build those into each other. And then pick up some of that color. And that will just give them a little bit of definition and a little bit of that edge right there so that you can see where your petals are. So I go in first with a very saturated color, and I grab some water, and then I kind of, oop, that was too much water. I go in and I spread that color out a little bit, same here. And then I'm basically taking away, really drying my brush as much as possible and picking up that color. Really gotta freshen up my water, so I'll do that next. All right, and then here we'll try to do something like this. I really changed up the color of that, but that's okay. You don't always have to be perfect. We're gonna probably have to redefine this flower a little bit, which is fine. We live, we learn. All right, so I'm really drying out my brush. Now I'm gonna pick up some of this color. And you can really work the color around as you wish. As you can see, I'm kind of leaving this lighter just so that it gives the impression of the back of the flower. And then the front, we're gonna edge a little bit. I'm grabbing like really dry color at this moment, so I'll bring this in so you can see. It's really dry. I'll probably grab a little bit more. I'm just loading up the tip of my brush. And let's see if we can define these petals a little more. Color. And now we've got 3 very different tulips, which is great. So now we're gonna switch over and we're gonna try some lavender. And so I'll switch over my paper and also get some new water. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so I have switched papers. I have grabbed some new water, which I cleaned off my brush. So as you can see, there's a very slight tinge of the pink to it, but there's not a lot. And when I dried it, I'm not getting a lot of color on here. So that's exactly what we want to do. And especially when we're switching from a different tones of colors. So we're going from a very warm colors, and now we're gonna go to very cool colors, which is the purple, bluish color of the lavender. So with the other flowers, we usually have started with the petals. But with the lavender, we're gonna start with the stalk. And that's because the petals of the lavender kind of shoot off from those stalks, and we want to have those stalks in place so that we know where to put our petals. So I've loaded up some green. Again, we're probably gonna grab a little more here because it seems my green is almost out. And we're getting this very pea green again. So I'm just mixing these two together. There we go. And I do want to load this up really nice and thick. And then I'm going to take the tip of my brush and I'm just going to curve down here. And then maybe one traversing here. And then one last one here. You don't want to overcrowd because of the fact that you are going to be putting a lot of petals on each side. So if you put your stalks too close together, it's going to make it very difficult for you to define the flowers. So I'm going to clean off my brush. There goes my clean water. It's now turned green. And we're gonna start again really, really light. So I've got purple and blue kind of mixed in here, and I'm just going to really, really wet it on one side and then see how that is, and probably add a little more water, because what I want is a very, very light color to lay down. So that looks good. And again, I always test my paper because, you know, if you lay wet on wet, it's going to bleed into each other. So I really wanted these to be dry. And as you can see, they're fairly dry. So then for this one, we're just going to basically use the tip to the center of our brush to kind of lay down our petals. So we're just kind of doing impressions, like kind of a leafy bell shape. And we're putting them upwards, and they don't have to match up on both sides. So you can have more on one side than the other, because flowers don't have regular, especially flowers like these, they don't have exactly the same amount of flowers on one side and then the other. So we laid down quite a few, and then we're gonna go across to the next one, and we're gonna start laying down some here, and then we'll go in with a darker color and add some more. This is just kind of laying down a background for the rest of them. And there we have quite a few. And then we'll go to the third one, and again lay down these petals, and they don't all have to touch the stalk either, and they don't all have to be the same shape. Careful when you cross. As you see, I crossed right there, and that can create a little bit of a mess, which is why we're not working with super wet color today. Okay, and then pick up a little bit of this color. This one came out quite big, but it's okay. All right, and pick up some of this color here. And usually I try to dry in between, so that way they don't bleed into each other quite a bit. So give it about a minute, and then we'll start laying in some darker colors. So I'll see you in a moment. All right, so we've let them dry a little bit. I actually made a little bit of a mess here when I went to check. So sometimes you gotta be careful. I was a little too impatient. So as I said, you need a little patience with this. And now we're gonna go in with a darker color. So I'm actually starting to mix this really dark purple in here with some of that navy blue that I put in here. Might add a little more blue. Go really get that mixed in, and now we're gonna go in here and just add more petals. And you're laying them either on top or in between, really doesn't matter. We're just filling in and giving it more petals, little flowers. Okay, and then we'll go to this one. And you may have to like switch back and forth on, because I tend to like having the tip of my brush towards the stalk and then just kind of pressing the side into the side to create that little shape that I want. And I'm just letting this pigment run out on the brush. Okay, and I'm going to add a little bit darker on this last one. And that gives us lavender. So there you are, 3 different flowers for spring. And you can, the great thing about these is that you can use them. What I really love to do with these, honestly, what I really love to do with these is create Mother's Day's card out of these. So usually I'll just go, you know, and start putting in my words. And that'll create a nice little card that I can give my mom or someone else that I really like for Mother's Day, or even just spring, you know, so you can create little spring cards that you can give to other people, or you can even frame these and put these up on the wall. They're really fun to try out and do, so I would urge you to pick up a watercolor set and just play around and just create your own little springtime flowers. So that's going to be it for me today. I hope you guys had fun watching and learning how to create some, you know, impressionistic flowers and watercolor. So, you know, next time we'll do some other fun stuff with watercolor. I'll see you next time. Well guys, I really hope you enjoyed this program, and if you decide to create these watercolor flowers at home, why don't you share it through social media with us using the hashtag Fountaindale LIB. And if you do want to see more great content like this, follow us on YouTube, or you can visit us at fountaindale.org/events. See you next time.